Slavery is as old as human civilization. Every empire, every continent, every era has known it. Serfdom, debt bondage, forced labor. Yet when most people hear the words slave trade, they think of the transatlantic traffic of millions of Africans shipped to the Americas between the 1500s and the 1800s. That is true in vital history, but it is not the whole story. There was another trade, equally brutal and far less remembered, where the captives were Europeans and Americans. For more than 3 centuries, men, women, and children from the coasts of Italy, Spain, France, and even as far north as Iceland were stolen from their homes. Historians estimate that perhaps 1 million or more white Christians vanished into the slave markets of North Africa. Few ever returned. How did this happen? Who built an economy around human theft? And what role did a young, barely tested United States play in ending it? To answer those questions, we need to look at the Mediterranean world of the late 18th and early 19th centuries. Europe was in chaos. The Napoleonic Wars set nation against nation. Trade routes were disrupted. Navies were stretched thin. Amid that chaos, a different business thrived. Along the Barbary coast, stretching from today's Morocco to Libya, pirates and privateers operated with state approval. They were not petty criminals. They were professional raiders backed by local rulers, seizing ships, stealing cargo, and selling crews and passengers as slaves. Their targets were everyone from European merchants to American sailors. Before the United States declared independence, American ships sailed under the protection of the powerful British Navy. But once the new nation stood on its own, that shield disappeared. By the 1790s, U.S. merchant vessels carrying timber, grain, and tobacco across the Atlantic and into the Mediterranean became easy prey. Congress initially tried to solve the problem with diplomacy. It authorized millions of dollars in tribute payments to the rulers of Algiers, Tunis, Tripoli, and Morocco. Treaties were signed, promising safe passage in exchange for cash. For a time, the strategy seemed cheaper than war. But was it? Did paying ransom buy safety, or simply encourage more kidnappings? And what would happen when an American president finally said no? Those questions came to a head when Thomas Jefferson entered the White House in March 1801. Jefferson despised the idea of tribute. To him, it was blackmail, a modern Danegeld, like the payments medieval England once made to Viking raiders, payments that only invited new attacks. He would not have to wait long for a challenge. In May of that year, Yusuf Karamanli, the Pasha of Tripoli, literally chopped down the flagpole at the American consulate, a formal declaration of war. For the first time, the United States faced the prospect of fighting on another continent. Would the young republic back down, or would it fight to defend its sailors and its honor? Jefferson made his choice. He would fight. He ordered a squadron of newly built American frigates to cross the Atlantic and confront the Barbary corsairs. Commodore Richard Dale led the first expedition. When he reached Gibraltar in July 1801, he found Tripoli already attacking American ships. Naval skirmishes followed, but the pirates were skilled and bold. They darted in and out of shallow harbors, capturing ships and demanding ransom for their crews. The stakes rose higher in 1803. During a routine patrol, the USS Philadelphia ran aground near Tripoli. The corsairs pounced. More than 300 American sailors, including Captain William Bainbridge, were dragged off and imprisoned. The ship itself, one of the most powerful in the U.S. fleet, was captured almost intact. The loss was both a military and a psychological blow. Jefferson refused to give in. Instead, he authorized one of the most daring naval missions in early American history. On the night of February 16, 1804, Lieutenant Stephen Decatur led a small team into Tripoli's heavily guarded harbor. Disguised and working in silence, they boarded the captured Philadelphia and set it ablaze, denying the pirates their prize. British Admiral Horatio Nelson, no stranger to naval heroics, reportedly called it the most bold and daring act of the age. Still, American sailors remained in captivity. The Pasha demanded an enormous ransom and threatened execution if it was not paid. Jefferson knew that further negotiations would fail. Something more dramatic was needed. something that would strike at Tripoli's very foundations. Meanwhile, in the Mediterranean, other Barbary rulers watched closely. Algiers and Tunis, bound to Tripoli by trade and family ties, debated whether to join the fight. Morocco hovered on the edge. If the United States faltered, the corsairs could unite and increase their demands. Jefferson had to act before that happened. Enter William Eaton, a former U.S. consul with a taste for bold schemes. He proposed an audacious plan: march overland through the desert, rally local allies, and seize one of Tripoli's key cities from the rear. It was risky. The force would be small, supplies would be scarce, and no one could guarantee the loyalty of mercenaries drawn from rival tribes and distant islands. But Jefferson approved the mission. If successful, it would shock the Barbary world and prove that the United States was willing to fight far from home. The stage was set for one of the most extraordinary expeditions in American military history, a march that would test the endurance of every man involved and change the way nations dealt with piracy and the slave trade. William Eaton gathered his team in Alexandria, Egypt in early 1805. His co-commander was Marine First Lieutenant Presley O'Bannon, leading a detachment of just 8 U.S. Marines. Alongside them were roughly 500 mercenaries, Greek adventurers, Arab fighters, and Berber tribesmen. Their goal was to cross the Libyan desert and capture the port city of Derna, a vital base for Tripoli's corsairs. From the start, the expedition was an exercise in survival. Food was scarce, some days only a handful of rice and a few biscuits. Water was rationed, temperatures soared by day and plunged at night. Discipline frayed, desertions were common. Several times, mutiny nearly ended the march. But O'Bannon and his Marines shared every hardship. They ate the same meager rations, stood watch through sandstorms, and treated Muslim and Christian soldiers with equal respect. Slowly, trust grew. The men began to believe that this unlikely band might actually succeed. After weeks of grueling travel, the force reached the coastal outpost of Bomba, where American warships USS Argus, Nautilus, and Hornet waited with fresh supplies and naval guns. The fleet's presence boosted morale and provided heavy firepower for the final assault. On April 27, 1805, the attack began. As naval cannon roared from offshore, O'Bannon led his Marines and Greek gunners in a charge against Derna's defenses. Enemy musket fire rained down, but the Americans and their allies pressed forward. House by house, street by street, they fought their way in. By mid-afternoon, the stars and stripes flew over Derna's captured batteries, the first time an American flag had been raised on foreign soil. The victory freed captives and crippled Tripoli's ability to terrorize Mediterranean shipping. Eaton was wounded, but his gamble had paid off. The success sent shockwaves across North Africa and Europe. If a handful of Marines and a ragtag army could take a fortified city, what else might the United States attempt? More importantly, it proved that the white slave trade could be challenged not just with treaties and payments, but with decisive military action. Tripoli's ruler, Yusuf Karamanli, now faced an unwelcome choice: continue fighting and risk losing more territory, or negotiate. Under pressure from American warships and with Derna in enemy hands, he chose negotiation. On June 10, 1805, aboard the USS Constitution, Karamanli signed a treaty with the United States. It secured the release of American prisoners and guaranteed that U.S. ships could sail the Mediterranean without paying tribute. No more annual ransoms. No more protection money. The treaty had wider consequences. Inspired by America's success, European nations began rethinking their own policies. Britain, France, and others strengthened their naval patrols and stopped paying tribute. Over time, the combined economic and military pressure strangled the Barbary corsairs' business model. The white slave trade, which for centuries had turned human lives into profit along the southern Mediterranean, began to collapse. Without regular payments and with hostile navies at every turn, large-scale raiding grew too dangerous and too expensive. One by one, the great slave markets of Algiers, Tunis, and Tripoli fell silent. For the United States Marine Corps, Derna became legend. The line, "To the shores of Tripoli," immortalized in the Marine Corps hymn, commemorates that first victory on foreign soil. O'Bannon himself received a ceremonial Mameluke sword, a gift that still shapes the Marines' dress uniform today. But the story is more than a military triumph. It showed that a determined nation could strike at the heart of a slave economy and force change. It proved that slavery was not only an Atlantic tragedy or a Southern American issue. It was a global system, and it could be fought wherever it existed. The war with Tripoli did not end slavery everywhere, but it marked a turning point. The Barbary corsairs, once feared across the Mediterranean, never recovered their power. Their decline was part of a broader 19th century movement that would, over decades, dismantle many forms of state-sanctioned human trafficking. For the United States, the campaign was transformative. It was the nation's first major overseas military operation and a defining moment for the young Navy and Marine Corps. It set a precedent. American forces could and would act far from home to defend citizens and commerce. For Europe, it offered a new model of resistance. By the mid-19th century, combined international pressure had largely eradicated the white slave trade from North Africa. Ports that had once thrived on kidnapping and ransom turned to other, less violent forms of trade. And yet, the broader lesson remains unsettling. Slavery adapts. It survives wherever profit outweighs conscience. The Mediterranean white slave trade may have ended, but forced labor and human trafficking continue in different forms today. Understanding this forgotten war is more than a history lesson. It's a warning. The same forces, greed, indifference, and political convenience, that once allowed pirates to sell Europeans by the thousands can reappear in new guises. If you found this story eye-opening, help us share it. Click like and subscribe for free, and join the conversation in the comments. What other hidden histories should we explore next? From the silent docks of Algiers to the desert walls of Derna, this is the story of how a young republic took a stand, reshaped Mediterranean power, and helped bring an overlooked chapter of slavery to an end.